What's up, guys? It's your boy Rich. So if I was to tell you that there's a perfect watch, it probably would be setting it up for failure, right? High expectations. But what if I rephrased that and asked, is there such a thing as a perfect diver's watch? Let's go check out OWC's divers. Let's go. And here it is in 40.5 millimeters, 51 from lug to lug, 12.9 millimeters tall, and with a 20 millimeter lug width. And the watchmaker and owner behind OWC, Orange Watch Company, his name is Dan. And, Dan is a very eccentric guy, but in a good way, because oftentimes it's the eccentric ones that end up changing the world. And I think Dan's contributions to the watch world is already significant. In fact, through my many communications with Dan, I would kind of sort of liken Dan to Doc Brown from Back to the Future.
It works! It works!
Because he is so eccentric and driven to do things the right way, the ways that he believes in doing something that is going to really make a difference. So let's start with the case, because I really want to get to just how extraordinarily well made this watch is. But I also like the look of this dial, right? Because it is a mil sub, which is a military submariner, but there isn't anything about this watch that reminds me of a Rolex Submariner. It is its own. I like the orange seconds hand. The orange branding for Orange Watch Company. It just makes sense that it does have a splash of orange there. The applied markers, the snowflake hands. I like that all. But what really drew me to it is this dial. While most dials have a sunburst effect, this does not have a sunburst effect. Or while some have some texturing to it, this does not have any texturing to it. Instead, Dan chose a really nice, silky smooth midnight dial. And it is that silkiness that really is really easy just to stare at. I find myself staring at this dial a lot. So this is a watch that favors enthusiasts who prefer substance over flash. It is that in any lighting conditions, I don't think this comes across as black. It is a true midnight. And it is the same along the ceramic bezel inlay as you would expect ceramic. So let's jump into the turn action and check it out. It is really well made. So there is going to be some play, but nothing serious. In fact, if you're going to have the turn action being this audible, you have to have some play. It can't be stiff. So there isn't anything wrong with this. Just really, really well made by OWC or Dan. So let's get into the exciting part to me, which is the build quality. See these screws? There's the first one on the bezel. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are Torx screws that Dan uses to screw the bezel directly onto the case. And it does have some knurling around the bezel and on the crown. So I am not an expert on Torx screws, but I did read up on it on his website. And basically, it is considered the best type of screws that I don't think you can over tighten. It is not a very common type of screw to use. It is an expensive process, but again, it is something that Dan really wanted to use. And I will leave a link to some of these what he refers to as musings in the description, because I find them to be very fascinating reads where I end up learning a lot. So the screws continue. There's the drilled lugs again with Torx screws and along the bracelet. And so these Torx screws are really beneficial to the links, because when we change out our links, it's almost as if we have to squint and pray and hope that we find the slot with the tools they provided, because we end up scratching the side of the links. Not the case with OWC. So here is one of the tools that they provide, and it's just really easy to do. So I don't have to hold my fingers up here and squint and hope that I find a slot right away. It is an easy target. So I can hold it anywhere, and then it's almost like a magnet, but it is not a magnet, and boom, there it is. I can change the links in and out. So that is just a really nice, convenient part of the bracelet. Probably the biggest part that I like about this bracelet is, see this first middle center link right there? It is a bit longer than most other bracelets. And what does that mean? Well, it means it's going to conform to your wrist a lot better. It's going to provide you with just a great fit. And that is what fascinated me about the fit of this watch, because it just fit my 6.5-inch wrist so perfectly. So I was wondering why it is that this OWC fits me better than any other watch I have. And that's when I figured this out. So let me show you what I mean with another watch with an oyster bracelet. And it is a very common oyster bracelet, right? But it's just so well finished. And this is not like every other oyster bracelet. And I'll continue to talk about that. So I'm not going to talk about this watch because this is still one of my favorite watches that I enjoy. But you're going to see the difference. See this, how much, little bit longer this first center link is than this one. It's also a little bit thicker, the OWC bracelet, than another oyster bracelet. But it is not considered chunky. So for some people that think, oh, I don't want a chunky watch, it is not chunky at all. I just think it adds a lot of richness to this bracelet, a very substantial bracelet, a very rich feeling bracelet. So spoiler alert, I am going to rave a lot about this watch as I have done so far, and I just really sing the praises of this bracelet. But if there is one area that I can nitpick, I won't really call it nitpicking. Well, okay, I will call it nitpicking, but it's certainly not a flaw, at least not to me. As a diver's watch, it uses a dual clasp right here, but that's not the point that I'm trying to make. It does not have micro adjustments. But again, for me, that's not a flaw, and I think they had to make some sacrifice for the aesthetics of this type of bracelet, but instead it uses 2 half links, and that works perfectly for me. So I think that really, it's not an issue for me. So that's why we're seeing where the torque screws are around the bezel, the case, and the bracelet. We're also going to see it on the back of the solid case back. See, there are 6 torque screws right there, and that's because this is a super compressor. And the basic principle of a compressor case is that the case back can move towards the middle case, thus increasing water resistance. So the crystal has a retaining ring, and the case back is retained by these 6 screws that I just showed you. So both the crystal and the case back move inwards as pressure increases and makes the watch or the case more water resistant. So while we might have seen that in some rare watches, in a lot of those cases, I think it's the Omega Proloft, the solid case back that is also a super compressor does not move inwards. It is stationary. So what OWC did was took that to the next level. Just an incredible amount of detail for this watch. So what is the movement that is powering this watch? Well, this is where it is not a simple answer, and that's because this has seen a few different iterations. And in the past models, Dan has used a Seagull automatic movement that was a clone of the ETA 2892, and the Soprod A10 movement, which I think now is called the M100. So when we think of Soprod, we think that's the epitome of automatic movements that are non-in-house because they just have a great reputation. It's an expensive movement, a legendary movement. But for Dan's own reasons, he moved away from the Soprod movement and instead is using the upgraded top-grade Sellita 300 automatic movement that is chronometer graded and regulated in-house. So the workhorse among Sellita movements has to be the 200 movement, and even the 200 has a top-grade movement. But this is the 300, which is a top grade to the top-grade 200 movement, and it is a top-grade 300, if that makes sense. This is the very best that Sellita has to offer. And my accuracy has been plus 2 seconds a day. But Dan won't list the accuracy that he measures on his website. And when I asked him about that, instead, his response is that the consistency is more important than the accuracy because it's going to vary from person to person. Someone whose wrist sees a lot more motion will get a little bit more accuracy than someone who is more stationary. Again, simple but effective, and that makes sense. So what is the price of this beauty? Well, again, this is where Doc Brown comes into play because he won't list the price on his website. Instead, you have to inquire within. Though that's not entirely accurate, I do have an inkling of what this is going to go for, but I did not have permission to release that information yet. But what I can share is that previous models have gone for between $1,500 to $2,000. And in fact, I've also heard that some people actually waited a year for their watch, and I can see why. So is this going to be a cliche where this watch punches above its weight class? Yes, that is a cliche, but in this case, it's actually true. In fact, it punches probably a couple weights above its weight class. So for around $1,500 or $2,000, we are getting a lot of watch with a tremendous movement by a watchmaker who just pours all of his heart into the details of this watch. So, you know, for $1,500 or $2,000, this is a great deal. And I have never been one to say, you have to buy this watch, right? Because that's just not me. What I can say is that, is this a perfect divers? I can't say that. I don't think I can say there is a perfect watch for any one particular watch. But what I can say is that this is a perfect example of what a small company can do if they really want to. If Dan worked for a larger company and some mucky muck sent him a memorandum asking him to cut some corners to make the watch cost effective, Dan would not follow through on that memo. In fact, he would just delete that right away, because he believes in doing things his way, which he believes is the right way. And based on this watch, I cannot disagree with him. He pours so much details and introduces us to details that we just haven't heard before. I mean, I haven't come across a watch where this first link is built like this to make it fit me perfectly. Again, that is something that is new and I'm very appreciative of. So, you know, Dan is the kind of guy that, in addition to being Doc Brown, he's also like that watchmaking rebel, because he wants to give us the best, and probably because he's had experiences where he couldn't get all of these finer details in some of the watches that he's owned, and he is giving that to us without charging us an arm and a leg. He doesn't brag about his watches, right? He doesn't talk about the pricing or the accuracy. I think he is just so confident that once we handle his watches and experience what he wants us to experience, that it's going to be a watch that is just the easiest to recommend that I can make. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you the next time. So if I was to tell you that there's a perfect watch, it probably... So if we start with the dial on the OMG, it has a very nice OWC. OMG. Yep. So when we use a tool like this, it kind of sort of reminds me of chopsticks, right? As you become an expert, you can hold them way back. No, don't do that.